Do you remember that wedding from a month ago? Yeah, like that one that you needed to start editing yesterday? But you also need to prep today for your wedding tomorrow, and you're leaving for your first vacation in forever on Monday. So what do? It seems that the only creative part of your edits are the excuses you're going to have to give your clients. We have the solution, Wedditor. Wedditor is a team of top wedding editors, project managers, and account coordinators that help us wedding filmmakers edit. They match the right editors with your style so you can spend your time where it matters most, on your business. Nick and I both use Wedditor, and we don't know how we would run our companies without them. It takes a team to build an amazing business, and you shouldn't try to do it all on your own. Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor to help you free up your time so that you can focus on growing your brand. Be sure to use promo code HTFW for $50 off your first project. Wedditor, more than freelance, more than outsourcing.
Because remember, you're as a second, you're hired to provide peace of mind to the lead. And if you're not going to do that, why are you there? If you're just going to make them second guess, but will they do it the way that I've asked them to do it, now you're already hurting yourself to be hired again.
Hello and welcome to the How to Film Weddings podcast. I'm John Bunn, and today I'm joined by my good buddy, Mr. Nick Miller. Nick, how in the world are you? What's new? How's it hanging?
Yes, to all of it. I am doing really great in the world. Super excited about the fall. I'm really glad that you are back. You were in Italy forever, and we didn't get to talk like we always get to talk like every day. So it was weird.
I missed you. There was the bromance was like, I was like, I don't know what Nick's doing today. He's probably not up yet because it's 7 hours, earlier there. But yes, I did just get back from Italy. I'm almost over being jet lagged. I woke up at 4 this morning, wide awake. Yesterday was 3, but the trip was incredible. We'll talk more about that later, but I want to talk about what we just did, the interview that we just had with Larry Marshall. He's one of the admins of our group, our Facebook group. I met him at WPPI this year. I've followed him for a long time. He's an incredible shooter, and he has kind of found a niche with second shooting. And so we talked today about all things second shooting, what you should be thinking about if you're hiring someone to second shoot for you, or if you're becoming a second shooter, everywhere in between. I mean, he has shot for some of the best he has shot for some of the best companies out there, Penn Weddings, iNamix, Charlie Hilbrandt, to name a few, and he is kind of just killing it with this second shooting game. So Nick, it was great. So if you're cool with it, I say we're not going to step into it. We should jump right in.
You know what?
Today
I am cool with it. Let's jump in.
Okay, let's do it. Let's jump. We know the time suck that is searching for the perfect song for your wedding film. MusicBed has spent years collaborating with artists, bands, and composers to make it easier than ever for anyone to find the right song for their video.
With amazing artists like Chapters, Tony Anderson, and The Light, The Heat, MusicBed is the best place for wedding videographers to get licensed music.
Their subscription service was a life changer for me, especially since all of their subscription music is pre-cleared for every social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, Love Stories TV, and my personal favorite, YouTube, all pre-cleared.
And if you are interested in a free month of a MusicBed wedding subscription, head over to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed. When you sign up, use the promo code HTFW and you will get your first month for free.
All right, well, thank you so much, Larry, for joining us today. Why don't you take just a few minutes, introduce yourself, kind of give us the story of how you've gotten to where you are today, and just let our listeners kind of know, who is Larry Marshall?
Sure. So I'm Larry Marshall, and for 6 years I did wedding films in Indiana, and built my business over there. And then last year, almost exactly a year ago, I moved to Orange County, California, to because my wife got a job out here, so I'm coming out here with her. And with that, we had the whole network is in the Midwest, and so I've been rebuilding the business, meeting with people. But what I've really been enjoying doing actually is doing a lot more second shooting for people, because I don't have clients of my own, in that first year.
Yeah.
Really, it's just such a great way to fill in some of the pay gaps, and you have a lot of weekends free. Or even if that's just what you might want to do today, I really would love to talk about second shooting.
Yeah. And so you were out in Indiana and you moved to Southern California. Pretty similar landscape, pretty similar weather.
Yeah. Same Catholic weddings most of the time,
Yes, of course. No. And so you've been doing this for a while. You've been on, Jordan's podcast. Like I met you at WPPI. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to weddings. In our group, we've been just hearing lots of questions about second shooters and people that are newer that are wanting to get into it or just trying to figure out different things. So when, we wanted to have you on to kind of just figure out and talk through all the things second shooting, how to get jobs, how to do things, what should you be thinking of, all those kinds of things. So I'm really pumped to jump into that conversation.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Nick, let's do it.
And one thing that we want to start off by, saying is you might not be a second shooter or whatever, but we're trying to frame this in a way that if you ever have to hire second shooters or you're looking for people, so it's going to be helpful to both people that are second shooters and also people that are looking for second shooters some point down the line. So Larry, why don't you kind of just talk about this? You moved out there, you've kind of fallen into this like second shooter world. So why don't you just go off and say, how many now are you doing as a second shooter each year? And then what are some of the responsibilities, like if you could kind of compare and contrast, right, like a primary lead shooter versus a second shooter with all of your experience with that?
So I do I don't do a ton of second shooting. It's just that I have been hiring a second shooter for a long time, for pretty much 6 years. And with that, when you're a lead and you have expectations of a second, you know how to deliver as a second. I think people that have led their own business know exactly, or they at least know more of what's expected of a second shooter. And so I'd say I've probably second shot since moving out here, 15 times for maybe 5 or 6 different companies. And none of them are like the big national companies. It's all been just smaller studios that I hear about. And we'll talk about how to get second shooter jobs and where to post and stuff like that. But spoiler alert, it's mostly Facebook and social media. So what was it? What was the question?
I guess the main question is, in your mind and how you've been, approaching this, what are maybe as you think about a primary shooter or a lead shooter and a second shooter, maybe kind of compare and contrast what you would say the differences are in those.
Yeah. So in general, the lead shooter is definitely going to be more so the creative shooter who's going to be delivering on the style that they promised the client. And at least the way that I expect my seconds, and as a second, I really just want, if you can, as a lead shooter, if you know that your second is going to deliver what you asked of them to deliver, which I'll talk about how important expectations are before you go shoot with somebody you've never shot with, then you have peace of mind as a lead shooter, and they're delivering what you asked. Normally, a second shooter is not going to be doing your creative style shots, at least in the beginning. I think later on, when you guys get on the same wavelength, absolutely, you kind of feel more comfortable asking them to do that. But I think ultimately it comes down to the lead shooter telling the second what they want. And then, of course, the second shooter skills to deliver those requests. But for the most part, a second shooter is just there to deliver peace of mind. That's what they're being hired to do, to allow the lead to do what they want to be able to hand the couple with their film.
Yeah, that's good. So in my experience, when I've hired a second, I would say, okay, I just need you to make sure that you get the safe shots, the easy shots, don't do anything crazy. Let me, if anyone's going to do anything crazy, it's going to be me. But also in the past, I have, before my wife joined full time, you know, it'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I am responsible for all of the audio gear. I don't put that on my second shooter just because I know how I want it and all that. I might have them, you know, do light stands or, you know, set up the lights or, you know, carry our gear around, you know, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a get the safe stuff, but also maybe be a little bit of a pack mule and carry my gear around a little bit. That's how I've done it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've had that. If you don't have like a third person who's serving as the PA, which I think a lot of people who are shooting husband, wife, or even just lead with a second, whatever their relationship, they're generally not bringing on a PA unless it's a larger wedding, and they just want to make sure that they can move fast enough for that wedding. Mm-hmm. But that's that's good. John, how do you do it?
Yeah, well, so what I do, and I don't have my wife working with me, so I do have second shooters that I've had for a long time. You know, the things that really stand out to me, you know, I am hiring that peace of mind, but like more so than the ability to shoot for me is their attitude and the way that they present themselves. Like if you show up and you're a second shooter and you're wearing a baseball hat, like to the wedding, or you're chewing gum and you look, you know, like a cow chewing the cud or something. I mean, like just that kind of thing, like the way you present yourself, the way that you, Nick, you don't know what that means. I know what that from means. Kansas.
It's just like, it's just like you probably have a stereotype around you because you're from Oklahoma and you're just adding to that.
Okay, sorry. What I meant to say is you just don't want to look not presentable, especially at the weddings that I'm doing. It's like I want someone to show up and like be dressed like a guest. I want them to show up a little bit early. I mean, it's the things that, you know, like it's more so their attitude and their willingness to serve and to help than it is their ability to run a gimbal or to, you know, set up lights in the way that I want them. So I'm looking, and with the people that have stuck around are the ones that their attitude is the best and they're teachable. So
and I have a list here just off camera. It literally says the too long didn't read list of like, here's what a second shooter, like these are the 4 things I think that it should be. Let me just go over it real quick.
Yeah.
Not in any particular order, but we have follow directions. Whatever the lead is telling you to do, please do that. Now, if you have questions on how to do that, especially with the first, maybe second time, ask those questions. But hopefully those questions are about the shot and the aesthetic of the shot, and less so about like, how do I change my white balance on this camera to that? Because otherwise then you're just slowing them down. And then they're having to baby you. And then you're not bringing that peace of mind that you are being hired for. So following directions, exposure, focus, and settling on the shot. Shooting wise, that's like, for me, if you can get exposure, focus, and settle the shot and not be fiddling with all 3 of those, like the physical movement and then the actual stuff, then you're doing better than 80% of second shooters out there. John, this is like what you're talking with. Normal around the client and people, just being presentable, like, and not saying weird. I mean, dude, people have said, I don't know if it's just the pressure sometimes of some weddings, but people just, when they get into a social situation, they just say the weirdest things. And I've said the weirdest things too. But when you're a second, there's no need to even speak most of the time, unless they're doing groom prep, and so they actually need to interact with the client. But like most of the time, if the lead's around, you really just talk with the lead. I wouldn't really talk with the bride, you know, much at all. And then the again, even more so, being fun and easy to work with, like, and teachable. Like if you're not fun to work with all day, and it doesn't like you, it's not like you have to be a blast, but you just have to be, you just have to get along and be tolerable. I mean, it sounds like the bar is so low, you guys, but like, it's just, it's these basic things that people don't have. And if you have these 4 things, you're better than 80% of the second shooters that I've worked with.
Yeah. It's definitely, to me, like whenever, so the second shooters that I hire again and again and again, you know, they get $10,000 or more a year from me just on second shooting, because, you know, I'm hiring a second shooter in every single wedding. You know, like Joel, my main guy, and he can lead for me as well, but like he knows how to set up all my lights the way I like. He knows to set up my audio, knows how to plug into the board of the band better than I know how to do it, and set levels. And he sets up all the tripods for the ceremony. He gets everyone mic'd up for the ceremony. He's doing all these things so I can be literally doing the thing that I do the best, best, which is the interaction with the couple and the creative style shots. He's getting a safe angle of everything. He's making sure the cake shot's wide and the ceremony's set up and that there's angles of things, just the boring, safe, and it's consistent. It's Ringo Starr. It's the boom, click, boom, click beat again and again. And so that's what I'm looking for, that peace of mind, that metronome, that, and so if I have Joel on a shoot with me, it's like, okay, you go set the ceremony, you go do this. I know he's going to show up and look nice and look creative. And so he's, $100 an hour. Like he's
I was
well
going to
worth
ask. I was going to
wage.
ask what you're paying because I do want to talk about the pay scale and if you were paying more. So some people may have just heard $100 an hour and just their jaws just dropped. Like
sure,
no way I would have to raise my prices. But that's the thing is that excellent seconds that are consistent and available are hard to come by, and so you're going to pay them because John, how much do you not want to lose him? Like you don't want to go through the process of getting another person and paying them $50 an hour. You're willing to pay double.
Yeah. I have other people that can do it, but I know I'm going to have a lot more work. And so to me, if he's there for 6 hours, and so I can let him go during the reception, after all the formalities of the reception are done, he can be gone. So he can be there for 6 or 7 hours. But yeah, I mean, it's worth way more to me to keep him happy and be like, he works at a church in their video department. He's great. So he doesn't want to do his own business, but it's like, it's not worth it for me to be away from my family. And so like he's one end of the scale. And then I also have newer people that I might be paying $25 an hour for their first few weddings.
Right.
And they're literally more work for me for the first few weddings. And so I am always bringing them in before the wedding and doing a lot of walking through my camera settings and things like that in my office. They have to come in and learn some of these things, and I walk through, like I write out on paper, like here's the bride and groom and the ceremony, here's where you're going to be, and so I've trained up 5 or 6 people that range from the 25 to 100 an hour kind of situation. So,
and that's why this is such a what should I pay my second? And it's going to really come down to what you as a lead, what you're charging. Because right there is going to be like, if I can't pay more than this amount, then I'm limited by that, because some people do not want to lose $600 a wedding because they're only charging $1,500 to $2,000, and that's just they're losing just too much money.
You can't do it. You can't do it on that budget.
You can't do it there. So you got to start with a newer person and train them and build them up and all that fun stuff. So let's talk about the pay scale here. So for me, what I described, if you follow directions, you can expose and focus and settle the shot, be normal and fun. I think that is the $50 an hour national average. It's going to be more or less depending on where you live. If you're in, I think someone posted recently that they're in Columbus, Ohio, and I think it was a she. She said that she couldn't pay more than, or find someone to pay more than like $25 to $30 an hour, either for her to second, or that's what she paid. And then, so this $50 an hour thing, it may not be what's good for your market, but I do think that should be where it heads, if not right there. And then $50 an hour could be too cheap for New York. I don't know about New York, but I do know here in LA and the OC area, 50 is pretty standard, but we're still seeing a massive variance of talent and workability with those people. It's just like people hear 50, and so they go, oh, okay, so this job, no matter what it is 50, and I have this gear, and so I'm 50, and I must be. They don't really understand what all goes behind that. So I think that's what the standard should be, 50, and then you start going up from there. John, you talk about how your seconds he's doing sound for you. He's setting lights. I don't know if he's like dialing in their intensities and everything, or if you've told him where you think you might want them ahead of time. But I think if you're doing lighting, if you're doing audio, because we all know how important audio is, and so if the lead is going to trust the second to do the audio, that's a lot of responsibility, because that breaks or it makes the films. So I mean, there's only so many ways to do it, but when you have a problem, are they able to solve it? Do they? Because I think the trickiest thing is finding the groom, finding the officiant beforehand, and getting them to agree to wear a mic without them giving you the evil eye. Not the groom so much, but I've had plenty of officiants, and maybe that's just because I did a lot of Catholic weddings in Indiana. They just gave me
one thing that I when it comes to pay scale and that kind of stuff, and just so you're talking about doing just that added pressure of doing the sound and doing that kind of stuff. A story one time I did second shoot for this guy, and I don't remember what recording devices that he had, but they were not the ones that I used, so I was unfamiliar with them.
New equipment.
He handed it to me and said, "Plug this into the DJ board." And I said, I've never used this. I don't know. He goes, "Here, you flip it here and you go and I said, "Okay." And I went and I plugged it in. But I think it was one of those ones where you have to double tap the record button. It's like pause and then it records. Wow. But I didn't know that because, and so he gets,
it was flashing red, but it wasn't solid red.
And so he gets it back and he was like, "Hey man, just wondering, what happened here?" And I was like, I don't know, and I felt really bad.
Okay,
but
you will feel bad.
But
but whose fault?
I don't think that was necessarily my fault or my responsibility. Though the one time John did hire me to shoot a wedding and he told me to bring my gimbal and I didn't, that was my fault.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I wasn't going to bring it up.
So
I was like, "Hey, Nick, bring the gimbal. Make sure I'm sending my other gimbal to another wedding." "No prob. I'll bring the gimbal." "Okay, that's why I'm hiring you, Nick. You're bringing a gimbal." "Hey, Nick, where's your gimbal?" "It's in Kansas. You don't need that, do you?"
He sent me a message and I just misread it and then I didn't confirm. Anyways, okay, back to the point where he asked me to record audio and I had never seen that before, and so it got all messed up.
And this is where the expectation falls onto the lead shooter. If I'm hiring somebody that I've never worked with and they have not used my equipment, I do not have any expectation that they should be responsible for my equipment. I would never hand them anything that they have not explicitly told me, like, I know exactly how to use this piece of equipment. So definitely that is the fault of the lead for dumping the responsibility onto someone who wasn't properly trained on that specific piece of equipment. Because you're very capable, Nick. It's just that with that specific piece of equipment, that's where the line of the expectation of, do you handle sound? You would have done it maybe if you were using your equipment, but you probably didn't even. I don't even know if you brought your equipment to it as a second. You may not. You may not have it on you for that exact moment. It may be in the car as a backup. So, yeah, I actually have. I have another list here that's how to be a top 10% second. So this is how you would command the $75 an hour plus, and John, in your case, $100, and I've been paid $100. I've been paid $150 an hour. I think,
before we kind of get into that real quick though, so you're like talking about kind of average, we're saying $50 an hour. Would you say that would be with gear or without gear? Because that's one thing that. I mean, it should be. It might not always be this case, but it should be. This is my price if I provide no gear, and then if I provide gear, my price should be more per hour.
Right. It should be, because the rental of that gear alone would be more than, like, there are people who price themselves at, like, I don't know, $25, $35 an hour, but if you just rented out their gear for that amount of time, it would be way more than what they're paying.
Right.
So. What you're getting paid. In other words, they're getting free, like a huge discount on gear, and then you're working for free. So I think $50 an hour does include gear, and I think it's $35 or less if you're having to come in and use someone else's gear. But keep in mind, I also don't want people to use my gear because they're probably not going to be familiar with it. Because one of the things that I have here to be a top second is that pretty much everything you're doing has to be fast and muscle memory. And if you're picking up someone else's A7 III where you can't transfer your settings over from your A7 or onto another, or it's just different. They're just all different. You don't understand the menu system. You don't know how to get to the, how to turn on and off zebras or something so that you can quickly expose the way you work. Oh man, I mean it's going to slow you down, and so therefore you're not going to seem like you were worth what you were trying to charge if you were trying to charge over $75 an hour. So I think people should bring their own gear.
Yeah, I was going to add, I don't think I've ever hired anybody where I didn't provide the gear. So that's like even when Joel is shooting for me, well, Nick was supposed to bring gear, but he didn't. I mean,
so you provide all the gear, John. That's what you're saying.
I mean, the majority of the time I provide the camera bodies, all the microphones. They may bring a gimbal or some lenses or something like that, but like just to rent the gear for some of these people. And what I will usually do is if they're bringing gear, I will say, hey, lens rentals cost this much to rent the gear.
Yeah.
Would you be down for me to pay you 60% of that? Plus what or whatever, and you just kind of work it out with them. And then I also, as the lead, like, and the owner of the company, I'm always like kind of painting a vision of like where it could go if they do a really good job for me. So like in Tulsa, it's not like Los Angeles where there's just this crazy, harvest of all these people that would shoot.
Yeah.
I'm saying, hey, for this first wedding, you're coming on as a third shooter just to kind of watch and to learn and move some gear around. It's $10 an hour. You're going to help me move some gear. I'm going to have you take some behind the scenes photos for my social, whatever. But like, I'm going to hand you a camera. You're going to run the wide angle at the ceremony. And so like they're learning for 3 weddings doing that. And then it's like, okay, now my camera is better. You know how I work better. Now you're going to be moving into a second shooter, which is usually somewhere around $25 an hour for your first few weddings. And then once we get in a groove, I'm going to bump it to 35 or 40 an hour. And that's kind of where it sits for most of my second shooters, because all they have to do is literally show up. I've already prepped and packed all the gear. They've learned my gear. And so it's a very easy, all you have to do is these things kind of a job for them. So I'm a little, I guess, unconventional, where it's not like I'm just finding a random video guy that's got all of his stuff and like using all that too. So I'm painting that vision though, and like leading them on what it is that I'm wanting from them, and setting the expectations. Like, I don't need you to be Superman today. I just need you to get a wide angle of this, record the whole first dance wide or whatever, or you're getting, and just kind of walking through. And I will give them a list and walk through it before our first wedding, saying, this is exactly what I want you to be doing in all of these moments. Here's the timeline, here's the camera, the lens, and just like I'm doing a ton of work up front to get them to understand and like paint that picture of. And then once they've shot with me 2 or 3 times, it's just like, hey, we're doing the same thing we did last time. You're going to get this, and then we get in this groove. And so that's where, like, if you're a second shooter or wanting to be a second shooter, I would implore you to not be annoying to the person that's hiring you, but like to be really trying to get a grasp and understand everything that they're wanting and where, so you can go above and beyond, so they will want to hire you again. It's not just about getting one job, but like if you're wanting to be a good second shooter or you're wanting to train second shooters, you definitely want to like be painting that vision and slowly like building this relationship over time.
I agree.
That's all.
I agree. If they're not, you're providing all the gear, and that gives you also a more consistent look.
Yep, exactly.
And you've invested in those bodies. How many camera bodies do you have, John? Is that 5?
I think I have 5 C100s or 6 C100s at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know. And a bunch of L series lenses.
Because for you,
so I have all the gear.
For you, it'd be like a headache if someone came in with a Sony camera trying to shoot. You'd be like, I don't. So the way that your business works, that's not going to happen. But here in the OC in LA, we're mixing brands all over the place. I mean, we'll say we have a preference, but in the end, you'll kind of take whoever is available and capable. It looks like, even if, because like I've shot my Panasonic with tons of Sony people, and I've used their cameras because I know my way around a Sony just as not as well as a GH5, but I've shot on Sony before, so yeah. I would agree with that. You're 25, 35, and then you bump them up to 50 when you start feeling like they're performing better than most of the other seconds are performing for you, I assume.
Yeah. And Joel's gotten to a point where he will lead probably 4 or 5 weddings for me a year, where I hire, like, do more than one in a day. And at that, he's somewhere 150 to 200 an hour to lead.
Right.
So, I mean, he's getting $1,500 for the day to lead a wedding for me or something. You know, and so it's like I can that trust that I've been able to build with him over 8 years of time, you know, and walking through the footage with him afterwards and saying, hey, I don't like how you did this. I don't, you know, like, I'm able to book 6 or 7 more weddings this year that were on average of $6,000. And so it's like, that was able to bring in, you know, and Joel's been at enough weddings with me, over 100 in the last 8 years, where it's like, now he can lead some. I give the bride a small discount, say, hey, Joel's going to lead it for you, that kind of thing. And so by doing that, he's worked himself up to where, like, on the 21st of this month, he's getting $1,500 to lead a wedding for me. And so he's as happy as can be. He shows up, I've got all the gear, he shoots it, he drops all the gear back at my office, and I write him a check.
Nice.
So, but that took a long time to get to, but that's allowed me to be able to handle more and then one in a day. So
Nick, you don't have your wife is shooting with you?
Yeah, she shoots 100%.
Have you ever hired outside of her at all?
She joined full time, where, you know, we officially were a husband and wife team about 2.5 years ago. And so before that, she would still shoot with me if she was available. She was a wedding photographer, and so if she didn't have a wedding, she'd shoot with me. But I had a handful of people that I would use. You know, now it's if she gets sick or our kids get sick or, you know, something like that, then we have to scramble to find someone last minute to do. But the people that I've been able to get are, at least in those situations, you know, have their own businesses, and, like, you know, they shoot, you know, lead shoot, you know, 30 or 40 weddings, you know, for their business. So while maybe stylistically they're a little bit different, I know that they know what they are doing.
Right.
And I would add one little piece of advice to people that are trying to bring in second shooters. Like, it's worth the investment of, like, $100 extra per wedding to bring a third, just as, like, a grip or whatever, and start teaching them and showing them. So that way you're building, you know, if you're not a husband-wife team, or, like, I have 5 or 6 people that I can call if, you know, someone got sick last minute. And that's something that I use for brides. And I say, hey, it's not just me. Like, if something happens to me, I've got 4 other people that I've trained to lead shoot.
Right.
I've got 6 other people that can second shoot. And so, like, it's worth the investment, $10 an hour, to have, you know, if you put a, you know, little something up on Facebook or whatever, and we'll get to talking about that, but just, like, bringing somebody just along just to test out the waters. Are you interested in shooting? Are you, no experience really needed, just a smile and a good attitude and whatever. And you can start, like, I'll pay you $10 an hour. You're going to come for 5 hours to the wedding. You can stay longer if you want. But then some of my best shooters have come from just that. Like, they've been only trained by me. So they only know how to shoot weddings, and they only exactly know how to do work with my cameras. So, and they're not, you know, big-headed, like, oh, I went to film school, so you have to pay me $200 an hour, kind of like. They're just like, wow, this is a great, you know, and I've hired lots of people that edit for me and shoot for me because they just had a great attitude. They were teachable, and they learned all this stuff, and they love it. And so, yeah. Anyway, that's all.
No, yeah, I love the $200 an hour film school person. If I hear someone has attended film school, they're almost immediately out of the running.
Yeah.
Because
talk to me about that. Like, what is it that makes you, what is it about that, like, that drives you nuts when hiring a second shooter? What is it about the film school student?
Well, especially here, it's like, they're very full of they could be full of themselves and feel that the way they've been trained from so and so is the way. But here's the thing: narrative filmmaking is what they went to school for. They did not go to school for live event filmmaking. That is completely different. There are so many instances. I mean, literally it feels like you don't have time in narrative filmmaking, but because it's a rush to get the pages done, for the script. But for live, when you compare it to live event filmmaking, you actually have no time. I mean, we're talking about, instead of having 5 minutes to light a scene, which is fast in filmmaking, you have 20 seconds to improve the lighting for certain things in live events. So, and since you're a one-man band, I mean, you're having to do all the things that improve the shot, not just the one thing you went to school for. So when I hear film school properly trained or whatever, I mean, it's just like, that's a red flag. It doesn't mean they're not going to work at all, but it does mean potentially a big red flag. I'd much rather have what you're doing, which is just let me train you with a blank slate.
The big question with the second really is, are you teachable? I mean, that's really, teachable. I mean, you could be went to, film school or worked on Hollywood sets or, whatever that big thing is. But if you are humble enough where you can come in and maybe you do know more than I do, but I'm the lead shooter, so I'm the boss. So when I say this is how I want it, you don't talk back to me. Yeah. I know that I have heard what I didn't mean.
Don't talk back
to me. No, but I have heard lots of John asked a thread in our Facebook group about second shooters and advice and all that stuff. And one guy, he went on a thing and he was like, listen, when I tell you to do something, please do it. Don't do it how you would do it. Do it how I have asked you to do it. Don't put your spin on it. I mean, if you get the shot that I'm asked you to do and you have time, okay, then you can go do that shot that you wanted to do, but do what I have asked you and don't be too prideful. So, I think that's a big thing that you're really getting at is just yourself getting out of the way so that you can do that thing that the lead shooter has asked you to do.
Because remember, you're as a second, you're hired to provide peace of mind to the lead. And if you're not going to do that, why are you there? If you're just going to make them second guess, but will they do it the way that I've asked them to do it? Now you're already hurting yourself to be hired again.
So tell me, what CRM do you use? If you're not sure or you don't know what a CRM is, I'm about to save you a lot of time and therefore money. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. Basically, a CRM is an online service that helps you better serve your clients. HoneyBook is both mine and John's CRM of choice. We absolutely love it. HoneyBook allows us to do all of our correspondence, contracts, and payments all in one place. One of the features that I love is the automated workflow. We all have emails that we send out to all of our clients, right? At 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, the week of. All of us do it. Automated workflows make it so that those emails can go out automatically. Since I don't have to take time to, 1, remember to send them out, and 2, to write them, I save time and make more money by working more efficiently. Are you interested in saving time on the business side of things? Go to howtofilmweddings.com/honeybook for a free 1-week trial. Also, because the Honeybooks really like me and John, we can give you $200 off of your first year, and that also comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Go to howtofilmweddings.com/honeybook to start saving lots of time in your business. Oh yeah, legally I have to tell you that John and I are affiliates of HoneyBook.
And I'll say the main job that I'm wanting them just to help me do is just to anticipate the next 10 or 15 minutes a little bit better. Like, hey, ceremony's coming up, it's 2:15. It's like, they're just kind of thinking ahead, and it's like they're helping me make sure that I'm able to serve. Like, they're assisting me to help the couple. And so, like, that's your job as a second shooter, is to, like, be ahead. If you're getting there early and you brought a bottle of water for me, or if you just are thinking, let me grab you a drink. Do you need to use the restroom real quick? I can get this shot or make sure this, or and it's like just there. And as a lead shooter, we all know, but like there's so much adrenaline and so many things going on that you like forget that you haven't eaten in 7 hours.
I think everyone forgets to drink. It's just like a fact. You just get home completely dehydrated and with a pounding headache that usually hits right around dinner.
Exactly. And if you're a second shooter and you can help anticipate these kinds of things, or it's like, hey, I'm going to go get in line for you to go get a plate of food, and I'm going to go, or whatever. Those are the people that are instead of like asking me what do they want to do, like what do you want me to do next? They're like, hey, I'm going to go grab some details outside because we have 15 minutes. And so it's the same kind of thing, with the way we talk about serving our clients. like the brides, that's what your mindset when you are second shooting. You need to go in and say, okay, how can I blow away this lead shooter with my servant's heart, with my attitude? I don't care. Like, I'm going to keep a smile on my face and be a good helper this entire time. And if I have some kind of feedback of I'm frustrated, I'm going to hold that off until after the wedding and kind of say, hey, this really made me uncomfortable or was frustrating, or how can I do this better? And then, like, after it's over, you can go back to them and say, hey, let me, what was the footage like? What'd you think? What can I do better? And somebody like that is somebody I want to hire again, as opposed to somebody, that is on their cell phone the whole time, or, like, you don't know where they went and they're just like sitting somewhere. I don't know. Like, I've had second shooters that are just like on their phone in front of people.
Oh my gosh.
Or, like,
yes. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. If like, you just like twing that nerve for me. When I see a second on their phone, now, unless they're like checking the schedule, right? Because they could be looking at the schedule. Which, by the way, if you put the schedule on your lock screen here, that's also a nice little tidbit there, so you don't have to open it up and get into it. But yeah, nail on the head there. Don't just like, there should, even though you want to just sit and relax and you think you have time, if as a second you're thinking about, well, what does the lead need? So let me just quickly go through this, like how to be a top 10%
I wanted to get back to that. That's what I've been thinking, and it's taken us like 20 minutes to get there, but we're there now. We're touching on it.
These were deep nuggets, though. This was sticky buns kind of stuff, and deep nuggets.
With deep nuggets here.
Just saying.
Super deep. Here we go.
Top 10%. I feel like it's the David Letterman, like top 10.
Larry's top 10. Larry's top 10% list here.
Blake, make a graphic.
This is how.
Blake, do something cool with
Yes.
that.
Okay. This is $75 an hour stuff right here. Okay, so 75 plus. I mean, you could take it as far as you want. 100, 150. I think it maxes out at 150. I haven't really heard of a second getting paid any more than that. Okay. And look, I wish I could show you guys this, because we talked about this. Literally anticipating the lead's needs. John, you were just hitting about this. This is not just...
I ruined the podcast. I'm sorry.
You did. But other than the shots that they need, like you said, if you've got cold water on standby, I mean, it's these little things that are just going to be like, oh my God, thank you for that so much. I mean, reminding them to drink seems silly. Shooting the reverse shot of whatever they're getting. Now, this is going to kind of depend on their style and what they need, but paying attention to what they're filming. And this can happen either during portrait session, romantics, or during ceremony and toasts. If you can tell what they're shooting and with their focal length, then you know what they need in the edit. So you don't both have to be filming the bride and groom's reaction to something that's happening. Somebody should be filming what they're looking at. And sometimes, and this is where hand signals can come into play, if you have some sort of simple hand signal system to go into what you're doing, just agree on something beforehand. For me, with the hand signals, I usually, I'll point to myself to indicate I'm getting a 2-shot, or I'm getting the person who's speaking. Whatever you guys want to do, but as long as you agree. So normally I might say, I'm getting the speaker, you get a 2-shot of the couple, so that way it's very clear what's happening. I don't use walkie-talkies. I know some people do, but I think they're useless unless you have the earpieces, because then you can't really use them during the ceremony, unless you have earpieces in. All right. So reverse shots and opposite focal lengths. John, like you said, sometimes your second is going to be wide almost the whole day, because you just need to know that you need to have the tight shot to yourself. Or if you're doing a first look and you just are going to cross shoot with a 270 to 200s, but you didn't have time to set it up and it's quickly happening, which happens all too often, you have to be able to turn to your second and just say, get the dad turning around, like when he turns around, and then know that where they're gonna shoot on a certain 180 line, so that you know to shoot on the 180 line of this way, and you don't have to literally walk them over and place them everywhere, because again, you need to be saving your lead time. If you're done with groom prep and bride prep still going on, and the first look location hasn't been determined, start looking for a good spot and communicating that. with the photographer who's probably done, who can then relay those thoughts to the lead photographer as well. You can do all the audio. That's a big one. You can handle the lighting if asked. Some people have a very specific lighting setup that they may want, but as long as they know how to turn on your lights and get them to 80% or 100%, I think they can do lighting. But you might come in as a lead and tweak it a little bit. But if it's at least up on the stands, like when you get to a location, get the things out of the bags that need to be out. Get out the tripods, even that need to be out. Start putting them, to their full up position that they need to be, so that again the lead isn't having to spend. That's not a good use of the lead's time. Like the lead could then start scoping out what's going to be the background for everything, what's going to be in the foreground that they're going to use, while that kind of not it's just work that take stuff out of the bags. You don't need to know exactly what you're doing to put a tripod up. Ultra fast reframing, exposure, and focus. I mean, I've seen people complain about their seconds not if something changes and you adapt, but if you adapt too slowly, you're never going to break the $50 an hour, because if you're just spending 2 minutes just no here, no here, no here, and then maybe exposure up, nope, down, and then checking focus as that shifts, and then finally you get it, and then you're no, and you just keep if a moment starts to happen, it is much better, except for focus, always adjust focus. It's much better that you just leave it a little over or underexposed, because then at least the editor can just put on the same exposure compensation filter or however they want to do it, and they don't have to ride it with you and cut back and forth, because the moment that exposure changes, it's sudden. It's not like a smooth ring on a cinema lens where you're able to nicely do it. It's blink, and we have to cut around that. So if you're not completely in place, just stop fiddling with it and shoot a tad wider than you might think you have to, because we can crop in a little bit. I'm going through this really fast, Nick. I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
I'm sitting here listening to you. I'm good.
I'm taking notes. I'm yeah.
If you're using 5 cameras like you are, John, just double checking that the lead is indeed recording on all of these cameras and that their white balances are the same. Remember we were posting, you were posting the toast shot. People were posting hey, what's my toast shots? And people were picking out that, oh my God, the white balance is wrong. It's only off by a few hundred or so it's not that big of a deal. But little things like that, asking what's the white balance, or calling out what you might think it is, and let them confirm. Those are the things that are you're saving time, because the lead is thinking about framing and how things are going to walk. The technical aspects of the camera are just going to fall a little bit by the wayside at certain times of the day. And if they know that there's a second that's checking those things, that's clutch.
Huge.
That's 75 an hour clutch. Again, the last thing I have here as a second, what are you doing? You are providing peace of mind and trust. I can't state this enough. If you are able to deliver, because all this boils down to, are you providing peace of mind and trust to them? So you'll be rehired again. Quick anecdotal story. When I came out here, I met a videographer online who was, I think at the time she was 5 months pregnant, and she had accepted weddings all the way through 8 months of pregnancy. And this is going to get into our next section where we're talking about how to be hired. But my story here is I basically sold myself to her, because I was going to ask more money than she traditionally pays a second. So how do you justify that? And the reason why, the way that I went about it was, I simply said, I'm going to give you the peace of mind that you're going to want 2 to 3 months from now, when you're at 7, 8 months. She was shooting up to, I think, 35 weeks pregnant. And I think in the beginning she didn't hire me for all the weddings, just the ones that she'd be doing a bit more driving, or they weren't in all in one location where she knew that she was going to be a little bit more stressed. And so I just basically sold her on the peace of mind, and she went for it. And later on, she's since had her kid just, I think 4 or 5 days ago now. I think she was really happy to have, because the help, because her back was hurting, her feet were hurting.
Sure.
It was just so many things that you aren't anticipating. And to know that you have a capable second coming was totally worth it. And That's what you're selling. You have to sell your work.
That's what, you know, in talking about, you know, our business is what we do, you know, for our clients. You know, people ask us, hey, I'm shooting my first wedding. What do I need to know? And the thing that John and I always come back to is serve them really well. Like, help them out, be kind, take care of things. Don't worry about, you know, this technical stuff. I mean, obviously that matters, but if you serve them really well, that's what matters. And Larry, it seems that you're saying the exact same thing as a second shooter, except you're serving the clients well by serving the lead shooter very well. You know, just
your client changes from the people of the day to the lead shooter.
Right.
I mean, because the lead shooter is ultimately serving the couple, so you're still serving the couple because you're allowing the lead to serve the couple properly.
Right. So that's all really good info.
Totally.
Your next thing you wanted to touch on, I think, flows really well with our question of the day. And today's question of the day is presented by Wedditor, which is more than freelance, more than outsourcing. Wedditor, you can check them out at howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor. And it is presented by, Eddie Almaguer. I'm sure I butchered that. I nailed it.
No,
anyway,
nailed it.
Eddie asked this question.
Nailed it.
For those who hire second shooters, where do you usually go to find them? So I know you kind of wanted to touch on that. You moved out to LA and you didn't have anybody, so you kind of got into that. So why don't you maybe talk about where is good places to find second shooters?
There are a bunch of groups for your area, and if there isn't one in your area, you should definitely be starting one, because there's going to be there's so much demand for second shooters that you know are available or that might be able to help out. Here in LA, there's probably 2 or 3 pretty prevalent ones that have a decent amount of work coming and going on it. So starting there, and then you just kind of start getting known once you start second shooting for people. But how do you start with those people? So for me, I have a few bullet points here as well. How to be hired.
I love this guy, Nick. He's got bullet points.
Okay. How to be hired as a second shooter when you've never worked with these people before. So you're in a new market, or you're just trying to start out and you like, what do I do? Or at least this is what's worked for me. When I came out here and I joined the Facebook groups, and someone would post that they need a second in one of these groups, one of the first things I do is I check to see if we have any mutual friends. And this is part of the magic of Facebook is you can relatively easily see this if they haven't hidden their privacy too much, and most people have not, at least in this aspect of it. And once I see 1 or 2, as long as you have at least one, and if you've worked with that person, find a way to, however they're asking for your information, maybe it's comment below or send me a direct message. Find a way to say, hey, I noticed that we have so-and-so as a mutual friend. I've second with them, and feel free to ask them how I was, because how does everything work in the wedding industry? Pretty much everything works from references and word of mouth and people saying, I would hire John Bunn. I would, because he did my sister's wedding and it was amazing.
You would hire me.
I would.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. And so everything is a reference. Everything is a reference.
Yeah.
So if you can get like that point of contact in that says, hey, I've worked with John on this. I think that's actually how I started talking with Jake. Out
that
here.
was me.
Yeah, you basically were like, oh yeah, you were the mutual friend, and I've worked with Jake now, I think 3, maybe 4 times since coming out here. So there you go. It works.
Yeah.
The mutual friends mention is pretty big, because here's the thing: out here. They're gonna get, you could get 20 to 50 people saying I'm available to second shoot for you. And how do you begin to weed these people out? You weed them out by the ones who are not just saying they're gearless, because everyone's just saying they're gearless and here's a link to my work, because that's what you asked for. But if you go above and beyond and you say, here's my mutual friends, they'll vouch for me, or you can ask them, or something like that, then that gets you into the top to at least be considered. You just need to be considered at this point. And then from there, communication is everything else. If you stop communicating with them, or You just seem a little flaky. That's like if they ask some questions and can you send me your gear list, and you're not sending that back relatively quickly, or at least saying, hey, I'm out on vacation and I'll send it to you in a second. But you just have to start communicating with them a lot more. Go ahead and friend them at that point and get going, so that way it's not going to that other folder that nobody ever sees anymore. It's like the abyss. And something that I've done, I'll say like, okay, so I'm 75 an hour, but because I've never worked with you and you don't know if I'm worth 75 an hour or 100 an hour, I'm going to work with you for 50, but just so that you can determine if you want to hire me again. Get to know me, see if it's worth it next time. This time I'm willing to, one time only introductory deal.
Yeah.
33% off type of thing, and get in the door with them at 50, and then but work like you want to make the 75 to 100, even though it's your first time and you may not know how they work exactly, so it's going to be hard for you to prove that you're worth that, right. But show that at that point, and they will more often than not start coming back to you for more work. Yeah. Let me see what else we have here.
It's a good bullet point. I like that one.
And we've kind of touched on this one, but I'm a little shocked at how many people, like, when I want to hire a second, I want to have a phone call. John, you have them come in, but, like, I want to at least have a phone call with them to literally go over the schedule and expectations. And, like, hey, for this ceremony, I'm going to be doing this. What I need you to do is this and this and this. And your top things are, and I will send them an email afterward that recaps this so that you have accountability for them. So as a second, you should definitely be, even if the lead doesn't initialize it, like, you should definitely be saying, hey, can we have a phone call? Because you have got to know what your responsibilities, because everybody is going to say the responsibilities of my second are a little bit different from, from lead to lead. So what do you need? I want to cater and adapt to your needs. So what are those? Let's have it usually ends up being a 45 to an hour phone call just to kind of go over this stuff. There's a little bit of the get to know you banter in the beginning, but get into the ceremony and toast. What do you want my shot to be? And showing that initiative is going to, again, gain the trust and the peace of mind that every lead wants to have in their second. And I mean, that's it. You're done. That's it. That's how you make the money, and that's how you do it.
Nailed it.
The end. No, well, I think too, just like on the heels of that, like, if you are going into your new second shooting job thinking like, I don't need to make 100 an hour for this shoot or 7, whatever it is. If you're like, I want to build long-term relationships with these people, like, that is whenever you're going to come across not salesy or not, like, you're coming across as you want to serve them, and that's going to be what's the most attractive. You add that with, people you're in proximity with or your mutual friends, and then you go work with them, and then you're, actually like a blessing to be around. Yeah. Or, it's like, oh, great. Now I want to hire them again. You get in that, that trust, that circle of trust with them, and now you're getting, maybe 3 to 5 jobs with them a year, and then you do that 5 to 10 different companies, you've got an extra, 15 to 25 shoots a year if you want them, which is only going to make you better, which is going to make you be able to charge more. Whether or not you're building a business on your own or you're just wanting to shoot second, but like, it's only going to make you better and your skill better. So like, don't look at like, oh, I'm so good, I need 100 an hour right now. I mean, especially if you're in a new market, it's just like, build some rapport with some of these people, and then they will refer you as well. Like, if I have a really good second shooter, if another Oklahoma or Kansas wedding filmmaker, like Nick has referred me a second shooter for a wedding once, and he did great. And it was like, that kind of stuff is very, over time, the crock pot, it really helps, a lot. So, okay. Yeah. Enough about that. I did want to ask a couple of things, just on the like couple of tips before we close up shop here today. What are some of your biggest pet peeves about second
cell
shooters?
phones?
Like, what is something?
He already said that.
Cell phones. What are other things that is going to make you not hire them again?
I got really close, didn't I?
Yeah, what if you did? So what things stand out to you if like you're a second shooter, avoid doing these things because they drive lead shooters bananas?
Okay, so other than the cell phones, if you can't tell already, I'm sure some people could be guessing just based on how many times I brought this up. It's the constant fiddling with things. Mm-hmm. It used to be focus being off, but more cameras have better focus peaking and or autofocus that tracks a face well enough that you feel confident that it is in focus. I mean, I'm talking about like back in the 5D Mark II and Mark III days where everybody was on that, and the only way to check focus if you were recording was to stop recording. Mm-hmm. And
I remember that. That was terrible.
And punch in and be like, looks good. Hope they don't move. Click. And then, I mean, because I couldn't walk up to their camera and be like, yeah, it looks like it's good. Because it could look totally fine on the back of that little 3-inch screen. But on a full frame sensor, which was a first at the time, and you're just not used to the shallow depth of field that you're getting, and so things look okay, but everything was soft. Anyway, so that's the old thing that used to, but now it's the little micro adjustments of exposure and framing. It's like just like if you're not good at panning or tilting and you just want to have a locked off shot, just lock it off and stop moving the sticks around, just stop adjusting the exposure. Because like I said, if you're also an editor, which is a huge advantage to any second shooter, if you're editing any type of work that's live event, you know how annoying it is to not have a shot settle for you to be able to hold on it, especially since my seconds are supposed to be the solid shot that I can rely on, so that if don't have my shot, or I was a little too aggressive in the creative nature of the shot, then I know I can reframe and know that I'm not losing a moment like during a first look or something. So just be a solid shooter. And sometimes I tell my PAs or some of my new, like a second that is shooting something, I say, you just have to outperform a camera on a tripod. Like just barely outperform dirt, like holding sometimes the bar is really low, but I just need to know that you are not gonna fiddle. Right. Like once we set the frame, don't fiddle unless the shot is like definitely gone and you make a game time decision to move it. Like that's fine. But I have to be able to rely on you, unless I have a third camera somewhere that I know that's my real second shooter over there, and you're just I hope it comes out. But don't be that person. Just that's my other tiny little pet peeve.
Nick, one thing, before doing video, my wife was a photographer full time, and so she would hire second shooters to shoot with her. And one thing that really frustrated her was like during bridal party portraits or whatever, whenever her second was basically getting the exact same angle in the exact same shot that she was getting. So, she'd be there with the 35 right in the middle, and then, her second would be just a little bit behind her with a 50. And so, she was like, it's basically the same thing. So as a second, do what your lead tells you to do. If they're getting the creative stuff, then, you stand somewhere kind of out of the way and get that locked off, solid shot. Or if they're in front with the 35, then you be on the side, do what they say. But, if I'm up front with the 35, you be on the side with the 70 to 200, nipping off details or, real close or like that kind of stuff. Right. So don't.
Right. You're getting hand movements or something. If you're aware of what that frame of view is. Right. What the 35 looks like at that distance, that's so helpful for you to be like, okay, so what do they need? He or she is not getting the hands coming up and some of those finer details that they would like to really cut into. Because otherwise, they're going to have to say, okay, do it again, and then they're going to go in with the 35 millimeter, or they might even say, give me your camera. But once you guys get on the same wavelength, if they know that you're shooting the hands or the rays of sun, or you're racking focus from stuff, or you're getting the ring that's on the finger, or things that the 35 can't get, at least at that distance, then that's totally right.
That was my tidbit.
I have a couple too that I want to add.
Yes, John.
couple things that just drive me bonkers that make me not hire a second shooter again.
Okay.
Number one is when the second shooter is really trying to make a relationship with the couple and the bridesmaids and like trying to crack up with them and joke around or like say something a little bit inappropriate or offensive or like if they're cursing a little bit or they're just like trying to be buddy with the people. Like I want them to be friendly, but it's like, you know, they just cross the line a little bit. That is super annoying to me. The other thing that really bugs me a lot is whenever the second shooter is trying to network with the other vendors.
Is that why you haven't hired me again?
That's why he won't hire me, I think. So
no, like I had a guy, it was fine. I was doing a wedding in like earlier this year or the year before, and he had his business cards at the dinner, like when we were sitting, handing him out to the photographer and the planner. He was a young guy, and like I pulled him aside. I was like, "Hey, you can't hand out business cards when you're second shooting for people." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry."
Oh,
but it was just like,
okay, he had remorse though, so he
and he wasn't trying to like be deceitful.
I was not
like
apologetic.
But it just like
I just did it and I didn't care.
And
no, I'm kidding.
I think too, like you have to be careful. Like I've had second shooters reach out to the planners after and be like, "Hey, it was nice working with you." Like the planner was like, "Hey, your second shooter reached out to me just telling me it was good to work with you. And like, if I ever need anything, they also do." And I'm just like, nope. And then the last little thing is you can't use that footage for your own reel. Like that's like, don't use footage that you took at my $1 million wedding and pretend that like you've built this brand. Like, so.
And you could have even done the lighting and posing that they're benefiting off of just because not to say that all they did was hit record, but just because they hit record off of all your hard work doesn't mean that they get to use
I am 100% with you with that second, not using for their reel or whatever. But I think that is also a conversation that you can have with, I mean, I know there are some, like I've seen some photographers in town. They're like, if you want to use this images from this wedding for that's fine if you shot them, but you cannot post them until 6 months after delivery or a year. Like there needs to be some sort of situation because especially if you're second trying to build your own business, like you can't, because you're always shooting for other people. I agree with you, but I think that can be, if you are a second, that can be a conversation that you can have with the lead about, hey, will I ever be able to use this footage for my own stuff? Not to disagree with you.
It just comes down to the expectation. No, it just comes down to the expectation. You're right. I mean, just set it and don't be offended if they say no, and don't take things personally. I mean, I had, this is my last story here. I recently messed up as a second, not in a like catastrophic way. It's just that I didn't set my camera to shoot at 60p. I shot Groom Prep in 24p. So this last part I just want to mention is like, well, how if you mess up, please accept responsibility for it. Even if it was stated ahead of time that that's what the lead shooter wanted, and I just didn't. I wasn't using my camera, not an excuse, but a camera was handed to me and I started using it, and because normally what I'll do is I'll set my camera the night before to all my settings so that I know it's ready. Because day of, I don't like doing anything unless I absolutely have to. Like I'm not going to be formatting cards generally, so I messed up and I said, "Yep, that's on me. I apologize." And as a lead, I would want to hear the remorse. I can fix this, because also that's also a thing that you can fix. It's just a setting. It's not I screwed up all of the exposure. All like the basics that you need to get down. So my other thing is just like, if you do mess up or you have some problems, just be. And I know it's tough to say we could have done better or we weren't as good as the lead was hoping, but this is how you will get a much better name in the industry, and you will learn much faster if you are able to be more humble about that stuff. And I'm not perfect at it. Like I was still like a little for 24 hours, but then you sleep on it. Like don't communicate. Like if you're angry, don't start yelling at someone else. It's their fault for any, like sleep on it and then come at it with a fresh look and just be like, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time.
Good.
So that's what. There you go. That's what I recommend.
That's good. So much good stuff. Like so many things to think about. I hope you took notes while you're listening to this. Go back, listen to this one again. I know Larry's involved in our Facebook group. If you haven't checked that out, facebook.com. Check it out. Search for How to Film Weddings. If you're listening on podcast, give us a review. We've been really honing in on getting some reviews from people. So if you have a chance, take 2 minutes, review our podcast. Let us know what you think so others can find it. Thank you so much to everyone listening, this awesome community. And I guess, Nick, until next time.
See ya.
We'll see ya.
See ya.